Hey, this is Mrs. Smeckens, and we've been working hard to go from just doing reading to leaning in and being engaged readers who are asking questions of texts and authors and seeking answers. We know that we ask questions before and during reading, and we ask those questions by seeing details and wondering about them. And then we read on, collect more details, and try to answer our own questions. Now, in the last lesson, we talked about how we can question the authors and the clues they might give us for some new and unfamiliar word. Remember that idea of when we're confused by a word, one that we've never seen before and we don't know what it means? And we talked about context clues. I tucked it under there because I'm going to need this space. All right. So we talked about you can listen to your thinking voice whisper questions of confusion as well. But in this lesson, I want to go beyond just figuring out what the text says, what the words mean. And I want us to question, analyze, assess author choices. In particular, I want us to evaluate author word choice. Okay, so let's talk about a couple things here. First, I want to talk about the words authors use, but I don't necessarily want to talk about the big vocabulary words that go with the topic and they give us context clues to figure out. I want to talk about the other words, the more ordinary words that are around big vocabulary words. The words that are maybe figurative language phrases or verbs, adjectives, words that they use to convey the meaning of the message. But I don't want us just to get the meaning. I want us to evaluate the impact of the words they chose. You see, it's called word choice. This lesson is about evaluating author's word choice. Every word they put in that passage is intentional. Nothing was by accident. They chose just that word. It may seem ordinary. It may seem like a typical word, but a lot of times when you stop and evaluate the word they chose to use in certain spots, you realize it impacts the meaning. It's more than just what does the word mean. It's how does that word impact the message, the overall meaning of the author's ideas. This idea of evaluate is kind of it looks like a checklist, right, on that icon. And that's really what it is. We're kind of stepping back and we're kind of looking not just at face value at what it says, but what it means. And it's going to require some analysis. Okay, so now let's clarify. When I say evaluate author word choice, I don't mean do you like it? It's not a preference thing, you guys. It's so not about you, the reader. When I say evaluate author choices, I want you to analyze what the author did, and I want you to kind of start to figure out why would he have done it that way. That's what I mean by analyze and evaluate. This is the fourth type of thinking voice question we're going to talk about in this series. Question why the author chose that word. That's what we mean by evaluate. Okay, now I've got more to teach you, but let me just show you this in action so you can appreciate what I mean by evaluate the ordinary word. Okay, so on your screen here, I have an excerpt from that Olympic sport skeleton passage we read a while back. Okay, and so they're talking about going down the sled in the ice tunnel and how it's kind of crazy and it's very dangerous and blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's look at this one sentence. And so one of the athletes, Sol, used to wrap parts of his body in duct tape. The ice on the walls tended to eat his sweater off his arm. Okay, so got it. All right, I know what it means. I know what it says. I know what it means. I am not confused at all. Okay, but I don't just want to know what it means. I want to evaluate the author's intentional choice of words. In particular, the word eat. See, the author said that the ice on the walls eats his sweater off his arm. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. All right, I want to evaluate that. And so when we talk about evaluating, remember the icon had kind of like a list with a clipboard. Okay, we got to look at a few things. I don't think you see a word and then bam, know its impact. I think it's a journey of thinking. And so let me take you through what I think the journey is. I think first you have to question, in order to know how powerful this word is, what would have been another word the author could have said? A more generic word, a more everyday way to say that same sentiment. So instead of the ice on the walls tends to eat his sweater off his arm, it might just say the ice on the walls tears his sweater off his arm. But this author chose eat. What's the impact of eat on the message that the reader receives? What are we understanding about this sport? Well, again, we've looked at what others might have said. Now let's look at the literal meaning of the word he chose. When you see and think of the word eat, we think eat food, chew, gobble, bite after bite after bite. It's slowly disappearing. Okay, so now I have another question for you. Let's evaluate what is the impression, the tone, the emotional state, the connotation of eat his sweater off his arm. Is this a good thing? Is this positive? Is this uplifting? Is this negative? Is this sad? Is this mad? What are we thinking? And so I'm thinking it's negative. If you're having something eaten right off of your body, it's scary, it's intense, it's dangerous. He chose this word because it has a scary, intense, and dangerous tone. It's chipping away, it's eating away. So when you ask me to evaluate what's the impact of the author saying it eats his sweater off his arm every time he brushes against the wall, what's the impact? Evaluate it. Well, when I put it all together, I say, wow, he's conveying how intense this sport is, and that it's ripping, it's shredding, it's thinning the protection off his arm bit by bit by bit, just like chewing food, eating a hamburger, bit by bit by bit. Yeah, that's what I mean by evaluate. It's a journey. That's why I have kind of that list, that clipboard. It's a journey of thinking, all right? And you've got to question why the author did what he did. Every word he chose is intentional. Okay, so now let's kind of really get our arms around the journey, the list that a reader would kind of look at to evaluate author word choice. That's what we're doing. We're questioning author word choice. And when we question it, we call that evaluating it. Not saying if we like it, analyzing it, determining what it means, the bigger picture meaning, the impact meaning. Okay, so evaluate author word choice. Here's the journey of thinking. Well, first, I want you to remember, it's a choice. The author chose this word. He's wondering if you noticed. It's subliminal messaging. He's wondering if you noticed. So first, after reading his original, what he wrote, then the first thought you should have when you're evaluating how he said what he said is to think, how would somebody else have said that? How would Joe Schmo have said that? How would a third grader have said that? What's a synonym, an alternative way to say that? Because then you can really kind of compare, all right? So first think of a synonym, an alternate version. Then look at the word or the phrase he used that you just came up with a synonym for. Look at that word or phrase and think, so literally, what does that mean? Just like we did with eats, literally, what does that mean? Because he chose that word. There's a figurative, there's a connotation, there's a reason he chose it. So let's first figure out what's the literal meaning. Then I want to kind of know the impression. I want to know the feeling. If you see that word, okay, is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? Is it harsh? Is it soft? Is it fast? Is it slow? What's the tone? What's the mood? What's the impression when you see that word? Because readers, remember, bring in their schema, and that's going to be part of it, is what you already know about that word you bring in. And so what is the connotation of that word the author chose? What's its literal meaning? What's its connotation? Okay, so now you put those two things together to kind of draw a conclusion, infer. So what's the overall effect? He used that word, and so what's the tone? What's the effect? What's the impact? Evaluate author impact. This is the process to evaluation of author word choice. This is what we look at. Okay, so let me show it to you again, and I'll do another example. And I'm going to take this excerpt from the Steve Jobs graduation commencement speech. Okay, this excerpt comes from there. And this was the part when he was remembering about love and loss and all of that. And he was really very aware that I'll be dead soon, and that's really valuable to know, because almost everything, all external expectations, pride, fear, embarrassment, failure, they just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason to not follow your heart. You are already naked. All right, that's the original. Okay, so now I need to figure out how would I have said that same point much more simply? I would have said, you have nothing. You have nothing to lose. You have nothing. But he said naked. What's the literal meaning of naked? Bare, stripped, uncovered, exposed. He's going further than just saying nothing. You have nothing. You have nothing to lose. He's saying you're naked. It's stronger. What's the impression it gives? It's open. It's unrestricted. It's free. Nothing to lose. That effect, that impact of open and freeing and exposed. He's conveying that pride and success and failure and embarrassment. Their clothing, you can remove it. Your desires, your passions, that's all that matters. Go for it. That's the power, the impact of the word naked. At least to me, that's the inference I'm having. You see what we're doing? We're looking at particular words. Test questions will do that. They'll talk about or ask about, what is the impact of this word? What's the author trying to say with this word choice? Every word is chosen intentionally. Okay, so now I want you to recognize that this fourth type of whisper, questioning whisper of our thinking voice is always an after reading thought. We steal information before we read. Question the text before we read. We continue to question the text while we read. And while we're reading, we're putting details together. We're figuring out our own answers. We're reading on to confirm, stay on track. Yep, got it. And then we finish the text. What we're talking about now is to step back, and now that you know what the text says and means, evaluate how the author said what the author said. This is the how. This is the craft. This is the choice the author made. And readers question that as well. It's not just about surface understanding. It's going below the surface and really seeing, how did the author do what he did? That's what we mean by evaluation. And that happens after you have finished reading the text. All right, so there are layers. Remember, evaluation it's this journey. It's a process. It's an analysis process, step by step. And so I'm going to put the prop first. You got to figure out what would be a generic way to say it. What does that word mean literally? The word the author chose. What does it mean literally? Okay, so now what's the impression, the connotation, positive or negative? And then what's the impact? What's the effect at that point? That's how you get to evaluation. It's what is the effect? What is the impact? That's what we mean by evaluation. But you can't just read the text and bam, get here. You got to go through the journey of thinking. All right, so help me out. Help me out here as we go on and try it a little bit with this excerpt. Remember the Goodnight Moon, the New York librarian who didn't like that book and it didn't make the top 10 most checked out list. Okay, so there's a famous children's book missing and it talked about Goodnight Moon, cow jumping over the moon. Okay, but here's the sentence. The book's absence from the most read list is so glaring, the library felt a need to explain why it is missing. Okay, so this is when a test would say, what is the impact of the word glaring in this sentence? What's the author's purpose, intention behind choosing the word glaring? Evaluate, analyze that word choice. That's what we're learning to do. And you don't just, bam, have the answer. It's a journey. And so the first thing I want you to do is come up with a synonym for glaring. The book's absence is so glaring, the library felt the need to explain why it's missing. You might have to restructure the sentence, but what could you say that's much more generic and neutral than glaring? You're thinking. It's just missing. The book is missing, and the library wanted to explain why. Okay, it requires an explanation. That's much more neutral, much more just put it out there. There's not a whole lot of connotation or impression, right? Evaluation is about the impression it gives, the impact it makes. Okay, so now let's look back at glaring, okay? Because I'm wondering what's the literal meaning of glaring. Think of the word glare, glaring, a glare. What glares? Lights. Lights glare. All right, so you got a glaring light. What's the meaning of that? What are some words that come to mind? Okay, bright, harsh, brilliant, shining, okay, intense, illuminate. Okay, so now let's think of, in context here, is glaring a positive or a negative impression, connotation? What are you thinking? Think of the word glaring, and if you say that you think it's positive, give me positive words for glaring. If you think glaring is negative, give me negative words for glaring. Okay, here are some. I'm thinking harmful, glare, like when you glare at someone, that's like a harsh stare. Okay, it's definitely a negative. All right, so a glaring absent title. The title is a glaring problem. It's not on there. It's obvious. What's he saying? What's the author saying? What's the impact of the word glaring on this? Do you think it was an accident? No, I don't either. Obvious, harsh. I'm thinking it's conveying the idea that it was deliberately, intentionally left off. This was a calculated choice, and it's not necessarily a positive. See what glaring does? Could just says, and it was left off the list, and here's why. It was a glaring error, and the library wanted to explain it. It was obvious, it was harsh, it was deliberate, and the library wanted to explain it. Yeah. Okay, let's do another one. Okay, so also in the Goodnight Moon, there was this sentence. Once she started offering reviews, this was the New York librarian, then her disapproval was enough to ruin a book. All right, so books got reviews. All right, and she, if she didn't like the book, she could ruin the book. I'm after the word ruin. Okay, so give me a synonym. If the librarian didn't like the book, her disapproval was enough to make it not popular, keep it from being popular, right? Just very generic, okay? Keep it from being successful. Okay, so now think about ruin. The author chose ruin on purpose. What is the meaning? Literally, when you think of something as ruined, what do you think? What words come to mind? What adjectives? Destroy, destruct, demolish. A building is ruined. It crumbles. It's in shambles. Okay, so now, if a book has been ruined, is it positive or negative impression? Negative. So give me some more negative words for ruin. Harsher than just crumble or shambles. More than just demolished. Stronger, harsher, negative. Devastate. Annihilate. Eliminate. It's gone, right? Okay, this author said the librarian's disapproval was enough to ruin the book. Now, tell me what the impact, evaluate the impact of the word choice, ruin. Put all those pieces together. If you had to put it in a sentence, what does ruin convey to the reader? That she could destroy a book's reputation. She could eliminate it from circulation. Gone. Poof. Yeah. She didn't just say she could keep it from being successful. No, you got to look at words and evaluate the impact that they have. All right, in this lesson, we've been learning about the fourth type of question our thinking voice asks, and it happens after reading. You have to finish the text. And then, now that you know all of the context, now your attention is drawn to certain words or phrases where we say, all right, what's the impact? I want you to do that. If you were in Mrs. Smecken's class, I'm going to have you reread The Carpet Fitter, all right? And we've read it before, but I want you to reread it, and I really want you to be thinking about these four words and phrases, okay? Walked all over, rich, beat, and the job is done, okay? Now, I want you to do just what we did. Instead of going vertical, though, it's going horizontally, okay? So I want you to read for the context of walked all over, and then I want you to give me a synonym. What would it be another way to say that, an alternative way to say that sentence? Okay, but then I want literal meanings of walked all over. Literally, what does it mean? Okay, now what impression does it give? Connotation. All right, put the literal meaning and the impression together and tell me what the impact is of that phrase that this author chose. And do it with rich, and do it with beat, and do it with job is done. All right, I'm going to give you the ones we did in this lesson so you can access that all on one page as well. So here's eating the sweater off his arm, naked, glaring, and ruin the book. And again, it kind of just walks all the way through. These are all the things we discussed or you attempted and tried in the lesson. So you're going to do that with Carpet Fitter in those four words. I want you to evaluate, analyze the author's choice of words. If you were in Mrs. Smecken's class, that's what we'd be doing, but your teacher might have a better idea.